What's up, all you Rec Poker followers? Hope you're enjoying this series as we're interviewing some of the local Minnesota players that have made some deep runs and have had some great results. Today's no different. We're going to be chatting with young superstar Aaron Johnson, who many of you know, who's made a deep run in the World Series of Poker main event and has a ton of other great results to show at his young age. I want to give a quick shout out to the Free Poker Network, who's been sponsoring this show and promoting what we're doing. Pete Bushy, all you guys, thanks so much for all you do and all your support. I highly recommend you beginning players check that out. Find a free game in your area, learn how to run it up, try some new strategies, meet some cool people, and maybe find yourself in Vegas playing at the World Series of Poker all for free. So check that out. But with that, I want to encourage all of you to follow us on Twitter at RecPoker. We've got a Facebook page and a Facebook group. I'm more prone to use the group, so please go ahead and join that and join the discussion out there. I also want to encourage you to give us feedback of any kind. We don't know what we don't know unless somebody tells us. So if you like the interviews, let us know. If you want more strategy, let us know. We will be moving from these interviews into more strategic things, but man, there's so many great people to talk to and get to learn their story and figure out their high-level approach that we're enjoying this for now. But let us know your thoughts. With that, let's join the interview that I had with Aaron Johnson. All right, well, here with Aaron Johnson, one of the most well-respected young players in the area.
And, oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's ever told me that, but I just, made that up. So.
No, I don't, yeah.
By me, anyway, when I played with you, I've only played with you a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've been at least 2 or 3 tables together.
Yep.
I know an MSPT regional final table, I was there with you and Koo, and learned a lot, let's just say that, after I got destroyed. And then I know we played at least one of the buyback, the 280 buybacks, we were at a table together because I just remember this big spot that you were in, and I just wanted to be inside of your brain so much. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that at all. It was like this big spot, and I know you'd already gotten through one day, and you're like, what's the right play here to maybe win chips, but also make sure I can get through? And it was interesting. You were thinking about it for quite a while, and I was like, I wish I knew. Get inside his brain.
Yeah, it was a really tough spot.
Yeah, and then the guy on your left shoved anyway, and you're like, oh! but no, it was good. So we played a little bit together, but I mean, I've got to know you a little bit just from watching you on different things and stalking you and that sort of thing. But thanks for taking the time for sitting down with us here and
absolutely
giving us some of your wisdom and some of your insight. And
we'll see.
Yeah, and you're a pretty young guy. Like, how old are we talking about?
I'm 26.
26, okay. And I know we'll get into this a little bit, but right now you're already ranked 44th all time in Minnesota career money. You're 504 in the GPI, so things are going well. Good career's off to a good start.
Yeah, it's going decent right now.
Yeah, so give us a little bit of background on. All right, Aaron Johnson, where did you come from, and how did you get into poker, and sort of take us there to where you are now and what you're sort of involved with?
Yeah, definitely. So I think my story is pretty common for like most kids who started like my age. I was 13 years old and I saw the World Series on TV, and seeing people play a card game and win millions of dollars could be rather enticing to an impressionable middle schooler. So I basically just learned how to play the game. My friends picked it up as well, and we started playing together. I would play online for play money on several different sites. Was just really infatuated and obsessed with the game. When I was in 8th grade, my best friend at the time was actually playing online for money, like under his parents' name and with their permission.
Right.
And I thought that was like rather strange because I was the consensus best player in our grade at the time. So for someone worse than me to be playing online for money, I kind of felt a little jealous, and I certainly wanted to join the fray. So.
Right.
With some coaxing from my mom and with some parameters that I needed to stay within, she let me play online under her name for like a $50 deposit or whatever at the time. So in 8th grade, I started playing for money online. Didn't really know what I was doing, of course. It was just an experiment,
right?
Maybe gone awry at sometimes. So did that for a few years, had decent success. I remember I was opening accounts on different sites, and Party Poker gave me like $5 for free, and I ran it up to like $1,500 or something.
No way.
So that was pretty cool, being in 9th grade and just running it up from $5. When I was in 10th grade, actually, there was a tournament on Ultimate Bet, which was my main site at the time. It was the $500 Ultimate Bet Online Championship, $1 million guaranteed prize pool. Mm-hmm. And I think I had about $1,300 to my name total. So I went to my mom and I said, Mom, there's this $500 tournament online. I'm going to give you $500 and deposit with your credit card if it's okay, and I'm going to play this tournament. So In a act of non-good bankroll management, I played this $500 tournament and ended up getting 26th place for like 5,400.
Okay.
So being in 10th grade and getting that kind of score was really
Huge.
awesome.
Yeah.
So that was cool. Played on and off till I was 18, just having moderate success.
So I would say that big score at the time hooked you, but it sounds like you were already hooked.
I was pretty hooked,
That
but
kind
I
of
mean,
affirmed your
having
ability.
that kind of score was really awesome, and obviously all my friends at school knew, and like when I cashed out the money, I like was obsessed with taking pictures of it and just like
Sure.
basking in the glory of the score that I had. So definitely.
And were you a game player prior to that? Did you always enjoy like card games or different things, or
not necessarily games? I was definitely a competitive kid, so I enjoyed playing sports of all types. I wasn't particularly good at any, so to be able to find an outlet where I could compete maybe better than anyone else was really like cool to me, because I always wanted to be really good at sports, but I just never was the best. So to find something where I could at least try to be the best was definitely like something that caught me for sure.
Okay, so that was because you watched the World Series of Poker at that age, and you're not really a card player, but there's something about the competitiveness.
Yeah, the
that was kind
competitive
draw for
nature
you.
of it,
Yeah.
and just being able to put your wits against someone else's wits and just kind of battle.
Okay, so now we're age 18 or so.
Yep, so I turned 18, and Treasure Island Casino is like 15 or 20 minutes away from my house, and I started playing live out there, kind of low limit cash games and tournaments, $100 buy-in and less. Played that for a few years. When I graduated high school, I actually didn't go straight to college. I took a few years off to kind of give the poker thing a try, but I definitely didn't really know what I was doing insofar as getting a good schedule and putting in the proper volume, and just probably wasn't the best idea, but I just didn't want to go to school at the time, didn't know what I was going to do. Was dabbling at TI primarily and a little bit online with moderate success. Went back to school in 2011 for a few years just to get an associate's degree, just generals that I could transfer somewhere. And it was in 2013 when I was in my last semester of school that I had a really hot Fall Poker Classic, which kind of catapulted me into the live scene and was able to kind of put me on a track where I could take the professional route seriously. And after I graduated in 2013, I started my professional career in 2014. So that's kind of how it happened.
And that's where it's been. And I know there's always a discussion around what is professional, what is recreational. I guess if you think about professional just as you draw your primary income source from poker, that is what you're doing now.
Yep, I'm a full-time poker player. I primarily focus on tournaments still. I try to mix in a cash here and there, but definitely don't play as much as I should. But my schedule is definitely pretty heavy. I'm traveling almost every single weekend somewhere, if it's within the state or out of state, and looking for just the best tournaments or tournament series to hit up.
And are you doing anything online at all?
Online right now, I'm not.
Yeah.
I just am not comfortable with the whole situation, and it's not the easiest to get money on and off. And there's a lot of questions just surrounding the viability of it currently.
But you're able to get the games that you need to sustain the income that you're hoping for without going online. You're able to get either the local weeklies or cash, or the bigger tours that you're going with. You're able to play enough to.
Yeah, I'm able to put in enough volume to at least give myself a chance to make a pretty good income.
So how many weekends a year do you think you're playing tournaments?
I'd say probably 80+%.
Okay.
So at least.
I thought you were going to
maybe
say
closer
80.
to 90%. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say 80, and I'm like, I was going to inform you that there's only 50 weekends in a year, but
sometimes it feels like that at least.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, are there particular tours that you travel with and to, or is it more what's available in the more in the closer geography?
No, I do have a few favorite stops or tournaments, I guess. I really like the MSPT. I think their tournaments are outstanding. There's a good mix of recreational and regular players, and usually there's 6 figures plus up top to play for. I like HPT events and World Series circuit events, and of course every summer is the holy grail of tournament poker, which is the World Series plus everything else going on in Vegas at the time. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you mentioned you had a pretty good score there at the end of your second year of college. Is that when it was 2013, 2014?
Yeah, 2013. I had a really strong fall poker classic.
Yeah. So what? Tell me a little bit more about that. What was that?
Okay.
What was the result experience?
I was going to school at the time, obviously, and I had time that I could play. So I played a $340 buy-in noon event on a Friday, and I shipped it for $17K or whatever. And then the next tournament I played was a $150 tournament on that Sunday. So basically a day after I had won, I shipped that for 8 or 9K.
Okay.
And then the next tournament I played on Monday was 235, and I final tabled it and got like 9th or something like that. So it was just an absolutely insane run.
Boom, yeah.
One of the sickest like positive variance streaks I've ever been on in my career. And when you're having that much success and playing that confidently, it can be really hard to stop you. And I was just feeling it at the time. Even though obviously skill-wise I was much worse back then, I was just running over my competition in those tournaments, and it was super fun and gave me a bankroll boost and a confidence boost.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and the timing was perfect. It sounds
Absolutely
like,
perfect.
As you're starting to make decisions on, do I get a quote-unquote real job? Do I play poker? Wow, there's some affirmation right there. And I love how you said that, a really good positive variance piece. Obviously, we know that poker is skill and luck or variance. And I think, people go through these streaks of not cashing for 10, 15, 20 tournaments in a row if you're primarily a tournament player.
Yeah, perfectly normal, too.
Yeah, exactly. But you go into this, man, I'm just horrible, I'm awful, whatever. And, of course, there's leaks and there's different things that you can work on. But on the other side, there's going to be those times where you ship 2 out of 3 tournaments and final table 3 in a row and those sorts of pieces where you start thinking, wow, I'm this amazing player. Nobody can stop me. And maybe you are playing really well, of course, but there's positive variance that's contributing to that piece. So when you're going through that now, now that you're more experienced even, and not as cocky of a young kid as we all are at that age, how do you balance that? The down streaks where you're saying, man, maybe you don't do this, but for some of us, where you're, man, I'm awful. I'm a bad player. Maybe I should just quit this altogether. And the positive streaks where you're like, man, I'm phenomenal. I'm like God's gift to poker. How do you balance that emotionally? Are you just able to separate the logic and say, I just understand statistics and variance? Or do you ride that emotional roller coaster a bit?
So I think I understand variance pretty well, but the game is just so incredibly brutal that it's tough. Even if you're like the most level-headed, logical person on the face of the planet, it's really tough to be able to take variance and kind of make sense of it and keep a good mindset. So it certainly affects me when I'm having a bad downswing, or if I have an upswing, I don't stay as level as I should be. But I think the only thing you can do is just understand how streaky the game is. Look for ways that if you are not playing the greatest, look to plug those leaks. Look to make your game just the highest EV, most kind of perfect game that you can play, so that the streaks aren't as bad either way. So you can have more upswings than downswings. You just want to make sure you don't let variance affect how you play. You always want to be playing your best.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So emotionally, if you're not feeling right, maybe enter a different game or take a week off or whatever that might be to get in that right emotional state.
If variance is affecting you that badly, just don't keep doing what you're doing. You need to find some kind of change, whether it's a mindset change or just improving your game. Yeah.
And so I know there's a number of the rec players that I've talked to, because I'm a stats guy, I'm a math guy, so I understand variance, and to some degree it's still emotional when your aces get busted by 3-4, which just happened to me. It's still it's still emotional. But you go, well, that's part of the game. I want them to call me every time with 3-4.
Yep.
That sort of piece. But especially when you have less experienced players who are only playing, once a month or once every couple of weeks, and they go through a streak of 10, 12 in a row without cashing, you're starting to approach 6 months without cashing.
Yeah.
And they start to get down on themselves. So I'd just love to hear your perspective on, like if you're willing to share, sort of, what are some bad runs that you've had? Like what's a bad run for you in terms of, how many tournaments you don't cash?
For me, it's probably a little bit different because I'm pretty consistent and my style is conducive to cashing pretty frequently. So for me, if I go 5 to 10 tournaments in a row, that's pretty bad, but that's certainly not the norm. For the norm, it's more like 15, 20 plus for a bad streak, and that's completely normal. That's within the mathematical, expectation, so to speak.
Right, yeah, if it's completely random, you should only cash 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
Which means, if it's law of large numbers, it means you're going to have those bigger streaks at all. Yeah, I want to talk about your style a bit, because you have a kind of a unique style too, and I want to talk about that. But even in your style, which we'll talk about, going 5 to 10 tournaments without cashing, that, for people that are listening, that's not that out of the realm of possibility. So, we go 6 or 7 in a row, we think, man, I'm horrible. Man, you're still not even at the percentage of 10%, cash rate. So, it's good for people just to understand that. So right now you're playing 80-90% of the weekends, playing quite a bit, following the tours. Are you doing just Texas Hold'em, or are you involved in any of the other games at all?
Almost exclusively Texas Hold'em tournaments.
Yep. Okay. And so now let's talk a little bit about your play.
Okay.
So I know poker players don't like to categorize themselves; they like to categorize others. But it helps for those of us who are listening, which are primarily the less experienced players. We know some people are more field players versus analytical GTO type. Some are more aggressive, some are more passive, lag tag. All these different labels that are out there. If you were looking down on your game, what characteristics would you use to describe your game?
So I'd say my game is very kind of math and GTO oriented. I'm very patient. I like to maximize my skill edge. I like to take advantage of people playing poorly. I like to play kind of strong ranges or ranges that are correct, so to speak, GTO-wise. And I'm always just looking to adapt to whatever the situation is. I think there's a cool quote from Bruce Lee that says you should be like water. So you shouldn't really have a form. You should just fit whatever vessel or situation that you're put in. So you kind of don't want to have any style, so to speak, but you just want to be able to have whatever style you think is going to be optimal in the moment. Yeah.
Which means from a GTO perspective, you have, I guess, you would say you have your default GTO ranges.
Kind of just like a base play.
But then adapting. If it's a looser table, you might do this. If it's a tighter table, you might do this.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, so I've heard the word, I think you've used it yourself, so I don't think it's a derogatory term, but the cockroach.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that label.
Okay, well, having a strategy where you're very ICM aware, so let's say you're approaching the bubble, it's so incredibly important with a variety of chip stacks to get into the money before taking very volatile or variancy swings. So having a cockroachy style is essentially just trying to be ICM aware and make the money before you start risking these spots that are completely unnecessary. It's hard to explain just off the top of my head, but it's kind of just being very ICM aware, trying to utilize your chip stack in the most effective way, especially approaching the bubble or pay jumps or whatever.
And so, I mean, just for the people that aren't as aware, I know we've talked about ICM a bit, and I've heard it described different ways. Maybe give us a kind of your high-level synopsis of ICM, and what does it mean when you say, due to ICM considerations, what does that mean to you?
So basically, ICM is the independent chip model, and it equates your tournament chips to a cash value. It's basically what it is. So if you have 10 to 15 big blinds on the stone money bubble, for you to cash in the tournament is absolutely significant because your chips are not... if you double up, if you have 10 big blinds, you're on the stone bubble and you double up, it's not going to outweigh the min cash if you just wait and get into the money. So it basically just dictates how you should play when there's a bubble or pay jumps. And another example is if you're at a final table and there's 2 short stacks. Let's say you're 5-handed at a final table. There's 2 short stacks, severe, and 3 people who are even. The 2 short stacks should always be busting before any of the 3 kind of bigger stacks bust, just because busting before either of the 2 short stacks is an ICM disaster. You're losing so much value relative to what your chips are worth, real money wise. So it kind of just is a way to think of your chips as real money and kind of find the maximum payout that you should be given with the situation that you're at.
Right. And so in the case of the money bubble, you have 10 big blinds or less. The ICM really is looks at what's your probability of finishing in all of the different places and that sort of thing. So you're saying when you're on the bubble, right before the bubble, doubling up doesn't really give you that much better of a chance to win.
Yeah,
your probability of winning is, of course, higher, but still pretty low.
Slightly higher, but it's always better to wait till you're in the money and then double up, and then your chances are even higher, and you've already guaranteed yourself the money, and you haven't made an ICM mistake.
Right. Yeah. Your expected earnings are about the same if you have 10 or 20 big blinds. If you survive, but if you obviously lose, it's 0. So there's that dynamic of getting to the bubble. People tightening up at the bubble, and then once the bubble breaks, it all breaks loose. So there's different perspectives on approaching the bubble as a medium to big stack. Then there's see some people that have a lot of success punishing the bubble. And you have some people that are, I'm just going to let them come to me, wait for them to make a mistake. Is there merit in both? I mean, do you tend to, not in the case where you're cockroaching, but in the case where you have the medium to big stack, you tend to be a punisher?
Yeah, usually. If the situation is right. if there's other good regs with big stacks at the table, that's a situation where you don't want to be going to war unnecessarily,
Right.
just because you're going to have these massive chip swings basically for no reason. The best time to use your stack in a punishing way like that is if there's a lot of short stacks at your table. If there's no one that's going to battle you back, that's when you just want to unleash the fury, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, and I love those spots. I mean,
for sure.
I don't do a lot.
One of the best feelings
I
ever.
don't do a lot well, but that's one of the things I do well. Is
Yeah.
the end of day one or early in day two, just building a big stack. When you have that situation, you can't just do it recklessly, but there's those situations. So when you look at Aaron, you see the young face and you hear about the cockroach. He's ready and willing to damage you and punish you if necessary.
Definitely.
So beyond, I guess, patience and trying to play game theory optimal to an extent, at least as a default range, what are some other things that you say are your keys to your success?
I think being able to adapt to all situations, like all areas of the tournament. So starting a tournament with 100 or 200 big blinds, and then being able to play a more medium stack, and obviously being able to play a short stack, knowing shove ranges for the short stacks, being able to hand range people pretty well, just having a good grasp on like where I am in the tournament and all the other factors that go into it, like just all the elements of the game.
So are you able to, here's a question I ask of everybody, and because a lot of us are struggling with this, as we break down a hand, we have all the information and we can dialogue around it and figure out the right decision. But when you're in live game action, seems like there's infinite amounts of data that we're supposed to try to process.
Definitely.
Everything from the basic things of where are we at in the tournament, what's the payout structure, to what's my position, to what's my stack size, what's your stack size, what's the stack size of everybody at the table, what's the stack to pot ratio if I call this bet, what's your range, what's my range, what do I think you think my range is, and what do I think you think I, there's all of these different things, and I could fold and I could call and I could 3-bet, and then what size should I 3-bet if I 3-bet. There's volumes of data, and so I think as you become more experienced, some of that just becomes intuitive. But for those of us who are trying to get to that intuitive state, what are those things that we really should be paying attention to? Or, I don't know if that's even a fair question.
No, it is, yeah.
But where would you recommend spending the mental energy? Because it seems like trying to remember everything is a lot of mental energy, and by the time the decision comes, I'm drained.
Yeah, you're on empty. So the biggest things in any hand are going to be things like effective stack sizes, point of the tournament, and hand ranges. Hand ranges is extremely important. People's frequencies, how often people have been opening, flatting, 3-betting, c-betting, all that kind of stuff. So those things are going to be very conscious that you should be thinking about, that are going to be at the forefront of your thought. And then all the other kind of elements of the game are going to be instinctual and kind of more autopilot-y and built into your poker framework already from thousands of hours of experience and millions of hands. But there still is quite a bit of conscious thought going on in the moment, and it's just really tough to kind of, like you said, there's so much stimulus and so much data that you're trying to kind of observe and take in and make sense of, that it can be tough. But when you have so much experience and when you kind of keep on putting in the repetition of trying to think correctly well in game, it gets a lot easier, and you're able to process more information in real time, and you're able to just kind of make better decisions and come to better conclusions.
Okay. So I have this, as I've continued, I'm a vision guy, a framework guy. I'm always trying to what's the framework versus trying to have all these independent pieces of information. And so when I hear you say that, and one of my things I'm testing is a framework where it's really just every decision comes down to range versus range is how I'm trying to think about this. And things like the person who made the aggressive play, what their stack size is, that just really informs what I think their range is. Is it tighter or broader? Their physical tells, that might be a tighter or broader. The type of player they seem to be, tighter or broader. I mean, so is all of that other information really just about you determining what their range is and tweaking that, or are those really independent things? No,
yeah, those kind of go into the cauldron that gives you the recipe to range someone correctly. So range, like you said, range versus range is actually incredibly important, and using all those elements that I touched on a little bit kind of goes into establishing what I think this person's range is, and what my range is, what my perceived range is, where my actual hand falls in my range, and kind of all that kind of stuff.
So as you're approaching kind of one good mental framework could be just I'm just starting with their range right now is wide open, and they did this action, and that changes it to this, and then there's the flop, and then there's the turn, and there's the river, and
Yep,
it's
so
all about
you're
their
going to
range.
kind of start with a wide range, and as things occur during the hand, you're able to kind of narrow it further and further until you're dealing with something that you may be able to figure out all the combinations of hands in their range, actually, and attempt to make the best decision versus that information that you think.
Yep. And you're actively thinking about what they think your range should be also, or is that not as...
Yeah, it depends. There are levels to the game. So a level 1 poker player is only thinking about his or her own hand.
Yep.
They're not thinking about anything else other than that. A level 2 player is thinking about their opponent's range. A level 3 player is thinking about their perceived range in their opponent's eyes, and then it goes on and on until you get to just, some
Right.
matrixy or just, a cluster of madness. So, yeah.
Right. And so do you ever play the smaller tournaments still? Are you ever playing like the 100, 150s?
Not too much.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Okay. Just because it's just the value's not there because there's always a bigger tournament to be playing. And
Yeah, usually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you recall back to the early days, or even now as you're playing, like you said, a lot of the tournaments you play, the World Series has plenty of recreational players that probably shouldn't be there. Maybe they are. What are those buckets of mistakes that you see? The most common mistakes that you see where you're sitting there going, yeah, they need some more experience.
So playing incorrect hand ranges pre-flop is a huge thing. If you can kind of figure out what an optimal range from each position at each stack depth looks like and kind of stick to it within, certain margins, that's going to be huge for you.
When you say stack depth, are you talking about just your own, or is that the effective?
Effective and your own.
Okay.
Both come into play for sure.
Okay.
So people playing incorrect ranges is a recipe for disaster because so many other mistakes kind of compound from the original mistake of just opening a hand that you shouldn't be opening or folding a hand that you should be opening. Definitely. So there's that, and then there's not having a plan for a hand that people play. You'll see people playing just decision. Like every single decision is like completely new. So they'll raise, and then they'll see a flop, and all of a sudden they're making like a decision where they just didn't have any plan. And as the hand progresses, they're just making kind of independent decisions. Whereas you should actually try to construct some semblance of a plan for a hand and kind of know what you're going to do on certain board textures and board runouts and what you're going to do if someone does something in the hand. Like it shouldn't just be completely a shock to you for when something happens. Yeah. Like if you open and you get 3-bet, that should not be a shock, and you shouldn't know exactly what you're doing. You should know exactly what you're doing. Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least have some kind of idea. Obviously, it's easier said than done. It's easier in theory to have a perfect plan and to know what you're going to do when something happens, but it's good to have some semblance of a plan and to kind of be able to prepare for any kind of outcome.
So you have that general structure at least. Obviously, you have to adapt, to what your hand is and what comes on the board a little bit and what the aggressive action that comes. But you have this general plan. And do you feel like that is an intentional thought process, or is that again something that's you've played so many hands that you just know if I open here with king, queen in middle position, I just know what I'm going to do if there's action?
It's mostly conscious thought, although sometimes it's instinctive if, you're kind of running low on energy, or if it's just a table that's like really weird and you can't really plan for anything that's going on. So it's mostly conscious, having a plan that you're thinking about in game, but there's definitely an instinctual and intuitive element to it. Yeah.
So pre-flop ranges, having a plan. Are there other? Well, let me ask you this before we move on. Like when you say people don't have a plan, I totally agree with that. 100%. I agree that's a huge mistake that we all make. Do you know they don't have a plan because of just the action they took, or just because of their physical reaction, or how long they delayed in taking action? I mean, how do you know they didn't have a plan?
Mostly from just observing them and seeing like every decision that they make. So. If they bet into a flop and something like, let's say they bet into a flop and someone jams, sometimes you can see that the person who jammed are just like, what the heck just happened? What am I supposed to do now? But you should definitely have like the thought, okay, if I bet here and this person jams, I need to kind of have some kind of idea what I'm going to do with that action.
Yeah, and it's not just so that you can act quicker. I mean,
no.
It's because then it helps make that decision. Like, okay, if I bet and they jam, I'm going to have to fold. Am I comfortable with that? And what's the chance that they might jam? And that's where you start looking at that, saying, well, if they're the type of player they're going to jam pretty often here, maybe I just check. Is
Yeah,
that
well,
kind of the
yeah.
idea?
Well,
or-
the more prepared you are for any kind of action that occurs, the better your results are going to be. Like if you're unprepared for actions that can occur when you're playing any individual hand, you're just going to be far worse off, and it's going to affect your bottom line tremendously.
Okay, yeah. So I guess the converse would be if it's a very high likelihood they're going to jam over a bet, but I have top set, then I should probably bet. Right? And
yeah, a lot goes into it, definitely.
There's some of those pieces, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You're probably laughing in the inside,
No.
but that's okay. I'm transparent.
No, yeah.
People know how I play. I've told this in other podcasts where maybe I don't know if I shared this with you before, but I was talking about at one of the podcasts how I just love to hero call. I just love it. I love it more than bluffing people off a hand. Hero calling.
Yeah.
And so I was playing at a tournament at Aces, and the guy made a big bet on the river. And I'm tanking. I got like bottom pair, and I called him, and he he had the big hand. He says to me, "Well, I only made that big bet because I know you love to hero call." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh," so I gave away all my secrets.
Now you opened up the Pandora's box of metagame where you have to kind of adjust your range to be more value heavy on your calls just to exploit them.
A little bit. Are they the kind of person that'd be listening to the Rec
Right.
Poker podcast?
You made it a lot harder for yourself.
Right. I get paid off more. But
Yeah.
okay. So anyway, so other big mistakes that you could think of, other categories, pre-flop ranges, not having a plan.
The one big thing that comes to the top of my head is kind of results-oriented thinking. So that's where someone judges how they played the hand based on what happens instead of judging a hand based on what's the highest EV play in the long run.
Right.
And having results-oriented thinking can absolutely just destroy your ability to get better because you're not judging the game objectively. You're judging the game based on what happened in one little simulation.
The variance piece.
Yeah, the variance piece. Like, there are such an innumerable amount of things that could have happened in that one hand, but just because it played out that way doesn't mean you should be judging your game based on that. Like, you need to take into account all the objective factors to make the best play in the long run and not worry about individual circumstances or individual occurrences.
That's so good. Yeah, it's so good. We need to hear that it's hard emotionally to get there, but I think you just do. You have to get there.
And you hear it all the time. You hear people telling like bad beat stories. Oh, I got an ace king versus 9-10 suited and lost. Like, if you get an ace king versus 9-10 suited, you're printing
60%?
You're printing theoretical money, and
Right.
you should be very happy. You should be
Right.
fist pumping. You shouldn't be like, oh, I should have seen a flop and folded.
Right.
No, you just need to judge hands based on what you think is going to be the long term, just mathematical profitability of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. Any other?
Those are the biggest things
Okay.
that I can think of right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I know how you're going to answer this, and you've listened to the podcast. You've heard this question before. I'm going to ask you the vague scenario that I've been asking everybody.
Nice. Yeah.
And it's the intent is obviously not to break down the hand specifically, but to help us understand what pieces of information are you really focusing in on that you're saying, wait, without this information, I can't even start to make a decision. So the vague scenario is, I'm on the button, or we're on the button. You're on the button, Aaron.
Yeah.
Aaron Johnson is on the button.
Yeah.
Under the gun raises, cut off, one seat to your right calls, and you're on the button, you pick up ace jack. That's all I'm going to give you.
Awesome.
What do you need to know to make a decision?
I may need to know what point of the tournament are we at, what are effective stack sizes, and what are the general frequencies of the people involved. So if I think under the gun is opening a correct range, ace jack becomes an easy fold because they're playing, correctly, and there's really nothing that you can do to combat that, and it's just a pretty trivial fold, I think. If I think under the gun is opening too wide, and I think that cutoff is flatting just a pretty transparent kind of middling range of suited connectors, broadways, suited aces, pocket pairs, etc., then ace jack off starts to become a pretty enticing squeeze spot. So if stacks are shallow, like let's say 15 big blinds effective, it's just going to be a 3-bet jam. But if stacks are deeper, this is kind of a really cool spot to have a plan to 3-bet fold. So let's say you're 40 or 50 big blinds effective or whatever. Ace jack this is actually a perfect spot to put in a 3-bet, and then if under the gun aggresses with a 4-bet, it's pretty obvious that that's going to be a nutted range like 90x% of the time, so it's an easy 3-bet fold. And if flatter flats, or if under the gun flats, then your 3-bet becomes almost a value 3-bet, because if they're just flatting, they're basically never flatting the top of their range, and you're playing in position with a range advantage and a skill advantage and positional advantage, which is a good thing to have all those advantages on your side. But so I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a good spot to 3-bet because Flatting, you don't really want to do because ace-jack doesn't play the best in multi-way pots. You're rarely going to flop like nutted hands. You're rarely going to make a ton of chips by flatting. But by 3-betting, you give yourself a chance to win just by the nature of them having to act still. Mm-hmm. And the hand's pretty easy to play because if you get 4-bet, it's just a 3-bet fold. And if they flat, then you're, like I said, playing in position with likely the best hand, and you have a range advantage and skill advantage and positional advantage, or hopefully a skill advantage, depending on who you are. Maybe, yeah.
Well, a few things that you said in there that are super important. I think one goes back to your concept of having a plan.
Yep.
I'm going to plan to 3-bet fold.
Yep.
Whereas I think we tend to think, or me, I'll just say me. I know there's others of you out there, but think, oh, this is a good squeeze spot. I raise, I 3-bet. And then, here comes the 4-bet, and you're like, crap.
Yeah.
Crap. Now I have ace-jack, which I don't love. But, we play these mental games of, I don't love, but are they just playing me? Or, I already put that many chips in. It becomes for those of us less experienced about, I want to win this pot versus what's the right EV play.
Yep.
Which is a clear fold.
Just kind of construct a plan. I'm going to 3-bet here, and if I get 4-bet, I think it's going to be very value heavy, and it just becomes a trivial fold.
So we have to think that's the beauty of thinking that through. So like you said, you're not just put on the spot where you weren't thinking through.
Yeah.
And now I've got this emotional disturbance going on in my brain.
Yep.
And then the other piece that you mentioned too is cutting out the top end of people's ranges, which I think from a hand ranging skill is something people forget about all the time. I'll see that. Somebody bets pre-flop and the person behind them calls. By the time they get to the river, people are like, oh, I know you got aces. Well, probably not. I mean, most people aren't that tricky. Especially maybe it's like a 4-handed pre-flop thing. And like, well, if somebody has aces, they're going to be 3-betting there.
Yeah.
But people will say that at the end, well, I bet, oh, you got aces. I know you got aces. And, you never really cut out the top end of the range. That's part of that.
So definitely don't try to range people to one specific hand for those people who are doing that.
I know.
And try to think thoroughly about what someone's range is likely to be. So in the situation that you brought up when we have ace-jack, if neither of them 4-bets, like if under the gun just flats our 3-bet, he knows that the cutoff is also going to come along, so he's rarely going to be flatting aces, kings, queens, ace-king, etc. He's going to be 4-betting those. And same with cutoff. Cutoff is not going to see under the gun flat our 3-bet and then decide, oh, I have kings, I'm just going to flat too. Like one of them's going to 4-bet the top of their range. So if we get a spot where we 3-bet and they both call, we can basically exclude the top, couple percent of hands and go from there, which is huge for how we're going to play the hand and what we can base their ranges to be.
That's so good.
Yeah.
And when you think about hand ranges, are you, again, part some of this is just second nature for you, but are you thinking about, okay, they have pairs, probably 8s through queens, and they have, aces down through ace-jack and ace-jack suited or ace-queen, and then they have suited connectors 10. I mean, are you thinking like that? Or is your brain thinking in terms of, okay, they got the top 15% of hands, which you just know because you've studied that off the felt, or they don't have the top 5, but they have somewhere between the 5 and 20% range. I mean, how are you actually thinking about it? Are you thinking about it in terms of the hand combinations that they have, or are you thinking about it in terms of percentages?
Kind of more so the combinations, and like when you're arranging someone, like initially, it's going to be more of an instinctive, okay, I think they have this block of hands. And then as the hand keeps going, as you can narrow the range, then you can start thinking of actual like possibilities in terms of combinations that you think they have. Okay, I think they have ace-jack off, ace-queen off, jack-10 suited, queen-10 suited, whatever.
Yep.
You're just able to construct a more narrow and kind of concentrated range that you can consciously think about.
Okay, and then you can compare that to where your hand is.
Yep.
And see where you're at relative to the range.
Yeah.
Okay, super interesting, because it just sounds like so much to...
I'm probably not explaining it the best either, because, it's kind of tough to talk about this like just off the cuff, but I'm trying to do my best, and hopefully some people are getting in.
No, it sounds good. I mean, I think that's how I've heard it described, is thinking, okay, what pairs do they have? What's the suited connectors? What's the suited aces? What's the all that kind of stuff? It just seems like there's so many combinations, but maybe your point is you end up having this general idea of this block, and then once it narrows, you can start to pick out some of those specific combinations.
Definitely.
But, okay, just one of those other things that we're all supposed to remember.
Yeah.
all the time. So as you're thinking about the newer players, a lot of the people listening to this are people that play in the bars or home games or maybe the 30s, moving up. We have a pretty good audience, but I mean, people are always trying to move up to that next level. How do I move from the $100 to the $280s, from the $280 to the $1100s? What are some of those things that you're thinking about either early on in your days as becoming a student of the game, or for people that are just in the first few years of learning this game wanting to move up? What are those key concepts then that we really should be paying attention to? Because we've talked about a lot of things. Some of those are next level pieces, but what are those concepts that you'd say you just absolutely have to understand this?
Yeah, I think it's what we touched on with the mistakes that people are making. So
opening ranges.
Try to have a pretty good understanding of opening ranges, and try to have a plan for hands. Try to have a grasp on variance so that you're not riding the emotional roller coaster, so that you can try to be more level-headed and able to take the bad swings that this game inherently has in it. So those things are definitely important. And just kind of testing your skills against higher and higher competition. So kind of wading into the waters and seeing where you're at. And if you're not where you should be, then maybe going and studying more, talking to better players than you, trying to figure out what they're doing that you're not, and just trying to get better at the game.
That's what I was going to ask you. So how do you get better? I mean, I know you've got a few friends of yours. As you're talking to the folks that are listening, how do you get better? Is it just from playing? Is it from, do you do online, do you have memberships of videos? Do you do a lot of reading? Is it hand histories with friends? What's your improvement method?
So one of the biggest things is just playing and learning from my own mistakes, and I think I'm able to I do a pretty good job at objectively analyzing my game and figuring out where I can plug leaks and where I can maximize my EV in spots where I didn't. So I'm really good at that. But more importantly is I have some really good friends and connections that I'm able to talk to the game with. Ku Vang and Vlad Revniaga are two of my best friends, and we have a text message thread that we're using very frequently to discuss hand histories. My main travel partner, Joe Bernard, is also a great resource because we're very often talking about hands, like on the way to trips or when we're at the hotel and we just both busted. We're going over our hands and trying to figure out what the optimal play was. And so talking with people who understand the game and who are very good is one of the best things that you can do. And then also just grunt study work. So subscribing to very good video sites, maybe using some software, reading hand histories, reading books, stuff like that can be a pretty good resource to get better at the game.
Now I hear people talking, haven't used it all, but Flopzilla. Is that something that you use, those sorts of tools, like hand ranging tools?
I have in the past, but right now, since I'm primarily live, they're not too applicable to live poker. They're more so based for online play.
Okay.
But they can still have some utility for certain live situations, depending on what exactly it is. But for the most part, those aren't going to be too applicable to the live game.
Okay.
You're going to be better off just watching training videos and reading high-level, material.
And of course, it's interesting because I've read a number of books trying to learn this game and talk to different people, and people do have different perspectives. There is no one right answer. Are there any resources that you would look at and say, boy, this, from a beginning to intermediate level player, this would be a really good resource or individual to pay attention to?
I think Run It Once is a tremendous resource. All their coaches on there that make training videos are world-class players who have their own thought processes and way to play the game, but they are all similar in just the fact that they're world-class and they understand the game on such a high level. So, they have a basic or some membership that's not elite, that's $9 a month or something like that. So I'd very much recommend Run It Once's service.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you do any coaching yourself?
I don't do any coaching. I've had some inquiries
Sure, I'm sure.
From several people to coach, but I just have never made the leap to do it. Maybe I'd do a good job, maybe I wouldn't, but yeah.
Yeah, you enjoy playing more than the coaching side of it, or just haven't thought about it that much, or just not?
Yeah, just haven't thought about it too much, I guess.
Yeah, I was curious.
In terms of putting it into real-world practicality.
Okay, so now at this point, what Aaron has promised is that every listener of this podcast will have access to his and Ku's and Vlad's hand history breakdown. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Settle down. But obviously that'd be a wealth of information. I think that's one of the things that I've got this group of people now with Rec Poker and this home game that we're part of. We love talking about hands and that sort of piece, and
definitely
a lot of really good recreational players. But sometimes I know we're wondering, are we thinking about this right? So I think sometimes there can be this danger in if you're surrounded with the people that are either all like-minded or not really thinking about the game in the right way, where we're affirming our own bad behavior.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. That's one thing that we have to think about. How do we get out of, or how do we make sure that the way that we're talking about it is the correct way? Mm-hmm. So that's where we can somehow get connected through a Run It Once or some video series or something.
Just so that you can kind of get affirmation from higher level players where you can kind of be more sure that you're talking about the correct kind of ways to go about the game.
Right. We did that in an earlier episode. Some of the people that have been listening for a while will know that. We broke down a hand with pocket tens. Mm-hmm. And, we came to a consensus on what it was. And then one of the pros was like, well, I would do something different.
Kind of came and crushed it.
Kind of crushed it, which is good. I mean, we were trying to be transparent, but we're like, we're all pretty much, had the same thought process. No, I mean, they may or may not have been right, but it was an interesting sort of spot to go like, are we... just in the cycle of bad behavior or what?
Yeah.
All right. So what's coming up for Aaron now? The World Series. What do you got planned for that deal? What are you going to play?
Yeah. So I got quite a few tournaments coming up before that, but yeah, I'll be in Vegas for about 7 weeks playing a pretty hefty schedule of 1Ks, 1500s, some side events at like the Venetian, Planet Hollywood, the Wynn, just any high value tournaments that are there that I think are worth playing. I'll be participating in.
Does that include the MSPT at the Venetian?
Yeah,
is that
most likely.
Okay.
Yep.
I know that's like a $2 million guarantee, isn't it?
I think it's 2.5 million.
2.5.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And then what do you have coming up before then? Some of the circuit events?
Yeah, there's an HPT in Chicago, an MSPT, or a couple MSPTs actually. I might be going to Choctaw this weekend for like an 1100 1 mil guaranteed. So yeah, I think I have 5 weekends in a row where I'll be traveling, then I have 1 weekend off before the series, so definitely going to be busy.
Nice. Is that exciting for you? I mean, as much as you play, is that still like, do you look at that and go like, man, this is just exciting to have all this upcoming tournament, or is it kind of a grind?
It is a grind, but you still get excited because, you're playing for serious money and you're doing what you want to do with your life, and that's just the most important thing. So for me to be a professional poker player, traveling to these places is basically living the dream. So even though it feels like a grind, it's definitely exciting. And obviously with the summer coming up, that's like the most giddy time of the year. It's a poker camp it's summer camp for poker players.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's guys like, we've got a group of like 4 to 6 of us that are going to go out to Vegas for a week this year.
Awesome.
First time we're going to road trip. Is going to be crazy.
Very cool.
But yeah, people like you should be super excited because you got all these fish that are coming in from all these different parts of the country.
Them in, yeah.
Right, exactly. Bring them in. The more the merrier, right? Yeah, treat them well. So when you go play those weekend events, obviously there's a main event, and I don't know how all the structures work, but I know the MSPT has different events in addition to the main event. So do you go like a Thursday through Sunday and play some of the side events, or is it pretty much like going to Choctaw and playing the main and calling it good?
So for like one tournament, things like MSPTs, it's a Thursday through Sunday, but still only playing the main event usually.
Okay.
Maybe mixing some cash on Thursday or a qualifier, because those qualifiers are pretty good value and
high value,
fun, Yeah. So that's gonna be a Thursday through Sunday. They got starting flight on Friday, starting flight on Saturday, day 2 Sunday. Then you're out of there on Monday. For things like World Series Circuit, that's a thing where there's going to be multiple tournaments going on in the span of a week and a half, 2 weeks. So that's more so where you're playing every single day and then playing the main event, which is kind of the main event set up for any other tournament, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you go play this event. On the Friday you play and you get through to day 2. What does your Saturday look like?
Saturday, either mixing in cash or working out or just doing whatever, just keep myself as fresh as possible for Sunday, but also trying to, make money if I have the energy and the ambition and whatever at the time.
And so one of my favorite things to ever do is bag for day 2.
Absolutely.
I don't play a lot, but I've bagged half a dozen times. And I just love it.
It's a great feeling to bag for day 2. Like honestly,
it is, especially with a decent bag. But any bag,
yep.
It's exciting. And
you have a chance on day 2 to make a run.
You don't know, right? Today's the day, and but one of the things I like to do, and I'm curious what your perspective is, I love to research the other players at my table. I don't know if I'm doing it correctly or not, but you're getting up way too early and figuring that stuff out. Is that something you do when you're going into a day 2? Obviously, I assume you look at your table draw, and in some cases you're going to know some of the players already. But if not, do you do a significant amount of research and try to figure out who's at your starting table for day 2, or not really?
Not for most tournaments, just because I'm going to recognize most of the notable players if there are any, and if they're not, then I can just look them up while we're playing. If I think that, this person's playing pretty interesting, I'm not sure if he's really good or if he's just running into some good cards or something like that. So if I sit down and I'm unsure of someone, then I'll look them up, or else it's basically just go in there and play. And one of the reasons I don't look up players is you never know how long you're going to be playing at your table.
Right.
Your table has people busting and new players coming in, so there's not necessarily that much like utility to doing that. But for big events like the main event in Vegas for the 10K, that's definitely a spot where if you make day 2 or day 3 or day 4 or whatever, that's where you certainly want to be doing a lot of study work in terms of who are these people and what are their results.
Well, let's talk about that run.
Okay.
Which I should have. I was going to talk a bit about your results, and we just kind of skimmed over it because your stats are impressive. You said you're 26.
26. Yep.
And I know the Global Poker Index, people feel differently about it, but at least it's some measurement of how people are doing. And then I saw that you're ranked 504 as of this morning. Anyway, and what does that mean? Well, that means according to their system, you're the 504th best player in the world right now.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess so, yeah.
I don't give a take, but that's pretty cool. But I was looking at like some of the names around you. You've got a little bit of work to do at number 500, 4 spots ahead of you. Do you know who?
No.
Phil Locke.
Oh.
So you're 4 spots behind Phil
Locke. I'm
Locke.
actually kind of surprised he's that high because I don't think he plays too much these days, yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. But like Scott Seaver, Blair Hinkle.
Oh, wow.
Those are just a few spots ahead of you. And then right behind you, Ravi Raghavan.
Okay.
Who you know, Natasha Mercier.
Okay.
I think it's
nice.
Natasha Barber, right?
Yep.
And then Joe Bernard at 514.
Oh,
he's only 10 spots behind you.
Yeah, 10 notches.
So anyway,
let's go ahead and put a bigger cushion between us.
Right. Maybe this weekend you can do that. But your numbers are huge. Your biggest cash that at least I saw was like 97,000.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about that cash and maybe some of the World Series, the main event deep run. And
So the 97,000 came when I got 72nd in the World Series of Poker main event.
I was thinking those are 2 different scores. Okay, that was the big. That was the big event. I know you had a huge run, 72nd.
Yeah, so I made it to day 6 and played for maybe an hour or so before busting.
Yeah.
But yeah, that tournament is absolutely incredible, and I recommend for anyone who has the funds and the time to do it to play it at least once in their life, just because it's an amazing experience and it's a tournament really unlike any other. Yeah.
So everybody says that, but why? Why is it unlike any other?
So you got a field. It's a 10K buy-in, but it's more like it feels like a $500 field is because there's so many amateur and recreational players who are truly just playing it to experience it. And
bucket list item.
Exactly. So it's a very, I don't want to say soft field because that can be derogatory, but it is a soft field.
Yeah.
And the structure is absolutely incredible. It's basically unreal.
It's 2-hour levels.
2 hour 50K
levels. Starting?
50K starting, which was new last year.
Right.
It was 30K before that.
Yeah.
So my deep run came with the 50K starting stack. And I mean, yeah, it just allows you to be patient, to look for the best spots possible, to take advantage of all the poor play that you're going to see, to kind of avoid playing unnecessary pots versus good players. Just kind of all the things that you want to do theoretically to make a deep run in a tournament. Yeah. And this was my 3rd time playing it, and I've definitely gotten markedly better each successive time.
But you cashed at least one of the other 2, right?
Yeah, I cashed the year before that. Just a 15K min cash for like 700th place or something like that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So congratulations, formally. I know there's a lot of us that were sweating you. That were, oh my God, Aaron made it.
The support was unreal. I mean, the Minnesota poker community is kind of just like unique in that the players who make deep runs get so much support, just overwhelming. My phone was blowing up for like 4 or 5 days straight. And it was.
Did you just try to just avoid it then, or were you trying to engage with it?
No, in the mornings I would always try to catch up on everything and show people that I was appreciative of them, supporting me, and
Well, for what it's worth, I was probably one of those guys. Hey, way to go! I think it's cool, but for what it's worth, those of us that are out there, I'm sure wouldn't care if you just ignored us for a few days and did your thing. But it was pretty sweet. Hopefully, there was people out there from Minnesota, I assume, railing you. Yeah. By the time you got
Joe
to day
was there
6.
watching me. And some others too. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So World Series, have you had other success out there as well? Any other?
Moderate success, I'd say.
Yeah.
Me and Joe Bernard went deep in the DraftKings 50-50 in 2015.
That's right.
And we went out like, I think 12th and 10th or something like that.
Okay.
So we'd be playing at the same table out of, I think there was 1,300 runners or something like that.
Yeah.
And to be at the same table with 2 tables left, just incredible.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Fun, right? Pretty cool.
Super fun. Yep.
Yeah. And what was I gonna? So one of the tournaments that's going on when I'm going to be out there, I think we're just going to play the dailies, even though I'm super tempted to play this as the marathon.
Okay.
Have you seen that out there, I assume?
Yeah.
Is that one that you're going to be playing, I assume?
Definitely going to be playing that one.
Because it's the closest thing that I could think of to the main event in terms of the structure.
Yeah, so if you can't play the main event and you have the funds to play something like a marathon, I'd definitely recommend that to at least get a feel of what the main event is kind of like. It's going to be the closest thing to a main event that you can get.
Yeah, because it's like 100-minute levels, 26,000 starting stack.
Yep.
So a fantastic idea there too.
For sure.
All right. Well, what else was I going to ask you? Since I have a little bit of time, since we got a few minutes left here, but I was going to ask you about like staking. I'm curious, like, what's your take on that? Are you? And if you don't want to share, that's perfectly fine, or we can edit this out. But just a general idea. I know some people have said, you don't realize that how many people are actually staked that have pieces of each other. I guess in general sense, are you, pro staking? Do you think it's a good for the game, good for the sport? And I guess what's your involvement? Do you get involved in staking others? Do you have other people stake you?
So I think staking is necessary for most players because in order to play something like the summer, you'd need a tremendous bankroll to be playing it properly, or else you're just being playing outside your bankroll and your risk of ruin is, astronomically high. So I think to have staking, to sell pieces of yourself, to buy pieces of others is a really great thing, especially if you're buying from reputable, skilled players who are never going to scum you and who have a great chance of having a return on their investment for either you putting money into them or just selling yourself and giving a profit to your investors. So yeah, I definitely think staking is a really good thing given the correct circumstances. Yeah.
Do you sell action or do you...
So right now I don't sell. I have an arrangement, a backing kind of arrangement where I just have one person who I work with and basically...
Just a risk control sort of thing for you.
Yeah.
Investment for them.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, because I know there's all these different models out there. I actually, believe it or not, I actually have investors. I have a pool of investors and
nice.
Which is great. I mean, it's phenomenal because we do it as a big package. Like it's a X number of dollars buy-ins, and we just until those buy-ins are gone, that's the whole package, and it works really well. And then I've heard the different notions about people having stables of stuff where there's coaching involved, and then I hear about people just going there and telling, hey, single event or a package at a markup, and so I was just kind of curious what your take was and all that. But it seems like it's good, but it does make me nervous sometimes. You're like, okay, do all these guys just have pieces of each other, and there's an inherent sort of collusion?
No, you don't have to be too worried about anything like that. That's for like the highest kind of tournaments, like 100Ks and super high rollers and stuff.
Like the $75 bounty tournaments.
Yeah, there's a lot of collusion going on.
I've heard that.
The swapping action and selling pieces, so be careful.
That's what I thought. I saw some checkdowns on the river with full houses.
Yeah, and get the floor called over on some of those. Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time again. But is there any words of wisdom you want to leave the listeners with?
I just want to wish everyone the best of luck. This game can be brutal, so try to manage the variance of the game with any success or lack of. And always hold yourself accountable for how you play, even if you think you played perfectly, because there's always a higher level that you could have played to increase your long-term ROI. And blaming the dealer, blaming variance, blaming other players, telling other players they did stuff incorrectly is only going to hurt yourself, and it's going to make you also look not very good. So I'd say definitely just take responsibility for how you play and always look to play better, even if you think you played well.
That's really good advice. We should just end there, but that triggered one thought.
Oh, for sure.
I talk too much. but you mentioned that you're one of these guys that I appreciate so much at the table because win or lose, and I'm mostly just seeing you win, but you treat the game when you treat other players with respect, and I think that's something that, for the most part of the Minnesota poker community, is very good. But there are instances, and I'm going to use my soapbox opportunity here for the people that are out there listening that maybe don't treat people the right way. As you look at new players, less experienced players like myself and others that are trying to move up in the stakes, you want us in your game. I just want to remind you that you want us playing the 280s. You want us playing the 1100s. And so when we come to tournaments and we make mistakes, you shouldn't berate us. You should encourage.
And it makes no logical sense to berate someone who's playing poorly because you want them to play poorly. Do you want them to play perfectly against you? What is this?
That's exactly my point. You should be saying, wait, that's a really good play with that 5-4 or whatever that is. And so, but anyway, I think as we're all, most of us are involved in trying to grow the game and that sort of thing. It's just something to keep in mind that even though the emotion can overtake you, you want to encourage people to play. You don't want to make it a bad experience, especially people that don't play that much. They want to have their experience be good. So, and so I appreciate your presence at the table and how you present yourself in that way.
Yeah, thank you. I try to conduct myself professionally and with respect for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that's just your personality in general.
Yeah,
but I do appreciate that. And so, last thing, just at some point, we'd love to circle back with you and break down some specific hands. So stay tuned. We'll try to catch catch you more on that. We'll actually get into some specific strategy on how to look at some hands if you don't mind doing that.
Cool. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Well, once again, thanks, Aaron Johnson, for taking the time to sit down with us and share your thoughts. Follow us at Rec Poker on Twitter, Rec Poker Facebook group. Feel free to email me directly, stevefredlund@gmail.com. Let me know any thoughts that you have on the program, how we can make it better, what you enjoyed, any of that sort of stuff. Shout out to the Free Poker Network for your support. So with that, we'll call it a week, and we will yap at you in another 7 days. Thanks.